Okay, everybody, welcome to today's highly anticipated webinar featuring our special guest presenter, Bernadette Janson from the School of Renovating. I'm Terry Ryder, the founder of hotspotting.com.au. I've been researching and writing about real estate for the past 35 years, and for the past 12 years have been operating the Hotspotting website. And one of the core trends that I've noticed recently is a significant change in the expectations of property investors around Australia. Traditionally, property investment is what we call passive investment. You buy a property, put in a tenant, and you hope that it grows in value. But increasingly, investors are seeking a little bit more than that from investment. They want some kind of value-adding strategy that accelerates the process of achieving profit from property investment. So today's webinar is particularly pertinent because our presenter, Bernadette Janson, is Australia's leading teacher of property investment strategies based around maximising cash flow with a particular emphasis on renovation. Bernadette has been undertaking residential property renovations for 30 years, and she's been teaching renovation through the School of Renovation for the past 5 years. It's a family business which combines Bernadette's expertise with renovations with her husband Stephen, who is a construction specialist, and her son David, who is an architect. So I invited Bernadette today for this special presentation after seeing a number of her seminar presentations last year and being particularly impressed by her obvious knowledge of the subject and her attention to detail. Before handing over to Bernadette for a presentation, I'd like to make those of you out there watching aware that you can send your comments and questions through to me by clicking the chat box on your screen and typing in your question or your comment. And I'll be putting your questions and comments to Bernadette at the end of the slide presentation, which will be in about 30 minutes time. And also be aware that Bernadette will be making a special offer exclusive to people watching today later in the webinar, so stay tuned in for that. So Bernadette Janson, over to you. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Terry, and thank you for inviting me onto this webinar, and welcome everyone. So yes, today we're going to be talking about how to 10x your path to financial freedom with renovating. So I'm going to get into it and move pretty quickly. I'm going to pack as much as I can into this session, and as Terry mentioned, you can ask as many questions as you like once you get to the end of the presentation. I just want to remind you that this information in this presentation is my opinion, and that you're advised to get independent advice that relates specifically to your situation to maximise your position and minimise your risk from the appropriate expert.
Bernadette, can I just check that your video camera is on, that you've got that clicked? I can see.
My apologies. I must have accidentally flicked it off. Okay, so just quickly, my name's Bernadette Janson. I'm the founder and the CEO of the and also my Airbnb empire. Basically, we teach people to create an income and a life they want through renovating. So in the early days, as Terry says, I've been at this for about 30 years, but I have to say probably the first 20 of them, I was quite misguided. In love with the idea of renovating, did a lot of flipping. So my mantra is that I like to make the 100,000 out of a project. But it wasn't until I turned 50 that I realised that I needed to get a whole lot more strategic. And at that time, I bought the property on the right-hand side of this image. It was a converted warehouse with the view to sometime retiring to that particular area, not particularly that property. And so instead of renovating and selling, which is what I would normally have done, I held on to it. And at the time, if I had have sold it, I would have made around about 165,000 in profit, which was pretty much the, my model. But I held it, and since then, which is probably 6 or 7 years ago, it has delivered a solid 200,000 per year in increase in equity, and that's the thing that flipped the switch. And so from there, I have been really working at developing a system for other people like me that want to get ahead quickly and want to use renovating to do that. And so this is what I'm going to be teaching you today. Now, usually when you go to buy an investment property, you've got to make a decision. Do you want to buy something for capital growth, or do you want to buy it for yield? And I have to say, we're greedy, we want both. So that's what this system's designed around. So there's a few problems when you buy an investment property. And the first one is you've got to save up a deposit before you can actually get it, and the legal costs and the stamp duty. So it's a bit slow if you're going that way. The second problem is, for lots of us, you know, we didn't do too much sensible stuff in the early years and get into our 50s and feel like we've missed the boat. So don't have as much time to grow the portfolio. And the third problem is, if you are funding a property like I do, which is I basically initially fund it on 100% borrowed money. You know, the deposit comes out of a line of credit and the rest comes from a loan. Then the majority of purchases are negative geared, and negative gearing is a tough strategy. It has its places, but it basically keeps you poor. So it's not really the way to go as far as I'm concerned. So basically what you need to look at before you get started is where you are in the circle of life, and tailor the way you operate according to where you are. So, you know, I'm not going to say all properties double in value every 10 years because it's not true. But I'm given that you're on Terry's webinar, you're pretty savvy around that, and you know that there are some areas that do. So we're going to assume that when you buy these, you're buying in the right areas. If you're 30, hopefully by the time your property or the property that you buy, you've had it for 10 years, and you're 40, it's worth double. And hopefully by the time you're 50, it's worth triple. So it's quite forgiving. You can afford to make a few mistakes. But if you're starting later in life and you're 50 when you start that process, you're looking at being 60 or even 70 before that property really starts to bear fruit for you. So basically what I'm going to teach you is how we shortcut that process and do it in a way that's relatively low risk. All property has risk, but we like to keep that to a minimum. I call it the 10x way to add a property to your portfolio. So this is, I'm going to step you through the steps now just to give you the overall picture, then I'm going to model it, and then I'm going to show you some examples and talk about some of the issues along the way that you need to overcome and how to do that. So step one, we want to buy an investment property. So basically what we do is access equity to buy that investment property from another property. So generally it's your family home, and if you're younger you may not have that, but if you're older you probably do. So take enough out of that to buy the investment property. You get a loan from the, you know, for the actual property, and the deposit and the costs come out of that line of credit or equity loan, whatever it is. Then basically what we do is we renovate it to increase the cash flow and to increase the value, to get it to grow quicker. So of course we go back to our little line of credit and grab a little bit more money to do a reno. And then what we do is deploy a high cash flow strategy to make sure that it's not eating into our pocket, and so that you can leave it to grow without it impacting your life. So let it grow. So that might be 1 or 2 years, but at the end of that period of time, you can come back and get it refinanced, pull out that initial input that you put in from your line of credit, and you can put that back where you got it from, or you can go again and reinvest that, okay? So remembering that the last property is should be cash flow positive so that it's not impacting on your activity, and so then you set up another little investment to add to your portfolio. So now, if you are in a hurry and you want to speed this up, you might double or nothing. Maybe if you've got enough equity to be able to set 2 of these processes going. But the idea is that you never have to put in any more than that initial deposit, okay? Now I'm just going to model that just for a minute to show you how it works. There are potholes along the way, and it is critical that you get it right. You need to buy in an area that's set to grow. Now this is why Terry's information is so important. So you need to make sure that at least in the initial phase that that property is hopefully in double-digit growth, so that you can get your money out quickly and get the next one bought. So I just want to show you, this is based on data from RP Data. Now, I know that their data is not always that reliable, but the reason I know this is I've actually been working with a client who's just done this, and so I know that these facts are true, and I'll show you her project in a minute. But basically, if you were to buy a property in Belmont, which is a quite a good area at the moment, and to pay $320,000 for it, if you had bought that in 2015 and done a renovation and increased its value to roughly $385,000, and then just let it grow, at the end of the first year, it would have grown sufficiently that you could pull out about $70,000 of your investment, which would have been around about $110,000 for the deposit, the renovation, and the buying costs. But if you left it for a second year, based on those figures, it would be worth $480,000. So you would be able to pull out the full $120,000 and go again. Now, this was me. What I would be doing is pulling my deposit out at the first year and getting the next property bought, and then waiting until it's appreciated sufficiently to be able to get your reno costs out and do the improvement on the second property. Now, does that make sense? I'm just checking in.
Yes, that makes absolute sense to me, Bernadette. All coming through loud and clear so far.
Awesome. So that's really the basis of how, you know, the machine. So this is one of our students who actually bought this property. She was hell-bent on buying it, renovating it and selling it. But thankfully I was able to talk her out of it. So I bought it for $305,000, did a cosmetic renovation, and when it was completed, she had it revalued at $430,000. She currently is returning $700 using a fast cash flow strategy, which I'll explain as we go along. But I don't know about you, but I absolutely love seeing renovation images. So I've thrown some photos in just to give you a bit of an idea of the rest of the property. So this is, you know, pretty much, you know, one of our standard renos. We follow a system, and it gets, you know, I call it the, you know, minimum effort for maximum return. And as you can see, these guys were very creative. They didn't have enough budget to do a deck out the back, so they picked pallets and put together a deck from those. Okay, so that's just a few images. Okay, so it's really critical that you get the right property, and I'm just going to go over this at high level because, you know, obviously there's a lot in it. But firstly, you want to make sure it has long-term viability as an investment, and I think if you're following Terry, you would be across that. You need to have an opportunity to increase the value. Now, there's lots of ways to do that. One of the ways is to add a bedroom. So if you can fit a bedroom into the floor plan without, you know, doing additions, you take it up a bracket, then that's a great way to increase the equity quickly. Although you need to make sure that you don't sort of upset the number of bedrooms with the size of the living area. So, you know, you can't look at that in isolation, I guess is what I'm saying. Look for land opportunities. You know, we've got quite a few people doing splitters. That's a great way to increase your equity quickly. Most of those are in Queensland. Good idea to look for some residual depreciation. Basically, a building depreciates over 40 years. If you're able to buy something that's pretty tired, around 20 years, then you've still got that depreciation to help with your cash flow, so keep your you know, tax down. And of course, you're looking for low maintenance and low running costs, because once again, they're the things that are going to be impacting on your cash flow. And particularly where the renovation is concerned, you definitely need to focus the renovation on producing a low maintenance property. Okay, so just to give you an example of jacking up the equity really quickly by increasing the floor plan. So this was a little studio. We actually did this for our charity last year, but it was a studio, 39 square metre studio, which we converted into a one-bedder. So bought for $475,000 and sold for $670,000. So created an enormous amount of equity in there. It also had very good cash flow because I actually put my properties on Airbnb either end of the project. And so, you know, really, once again, this is done to the template. So that's actually an IKEA kitchen, pretty simple type of renovation. but important to get the colour and style right, because even the rental market now is very discerning. And if you can really appeal to what they love, you will definitely get a much better return on your property.
Bernadette, could I just clarify a point there? You just introducing this property, you mentioned that the basis of the addition in value was adjustments to the floor plan. Is that basically what happened there?
Yes. Sorry, I didn't explain that adequately. So when we go back there, you can see that the studio was just a big bedroom and it had a kitchen in the corner. So basically what I did was put a wall in, move the kitchen out so it was against the new wall, and the bedroom actually sat behind it. So we created a kitchen, a living and a bedroom.
Okay. So you turned it from a studio apartment essentially into a one-bedroom apartment, and that's where a lot of the additional value came from.
Yes. Yeah, definitely.
Just there's a question that came in. We were talking about the property in Belmont, and Tim, who's watching, was just wondering where are we referring to there, because there's lots of different Belmonts. I'm aware of one in Geelong, there's one in Newcastle.
Oh, sorry, it's Belmont in Geelong.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Which understands the relatively explains the relatively low buy-in price.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yes, that's the price that we can only dream of in Sydney, I can tell you. So bathroom, so obviously with bathrooms in apartment buildings, there are some limitations. So this was pretty much the same layout, just really upgraded to create a much more luxurious bathroom. And so this is the new bedroom, which is, so on the left-hand side behind that wall of wardrobes is the kitchen. So where the bedroom was initially was a little kitchenette. So we also use a lot of flat pack for these sorts of things. So you can see the cabinetry around the bed is actually kitchen cabinetry from IKEA, just to, you know, ramp up the storage, because storage is really important, and also to give it a bit of flair. Okay, so the next thing is you need to buy at the right price. And for a lot of people, actually knowing what the right price is a bit of a problem. So that requires serious research. I have a rule that I like the vendor to pay my stamp duty, which means that I like to buy under value to the tune of the stamp duty at least. However, I have a bit of a rider on that. You sort of need to be careful, because some properties, you know, you can't do that. And if you don't pay for it, you pay what it's worth, then often you miss out on a great opportunity. So you've got to weigh up, you know, how hard you go on that. But I tend to I only buy properties myself in my own area, because I think the amount of knowledge that's required to get a really good buy is quite a lot. And I'm quite a lazy investor, I haven't got that time. So I work with some really good buyers agents and property strategists in order to do that. So most of the properties I buy are off market. And this is an example. So this is a project that I'm doing with our son, David, who works in the business. So had this gone to market, we probably would have paid an extra $100,000. But because I used a buyer's agent who actually got that off market, we got it for $985. Now we're doing that to actually sort of get him into the property market, and we've got quite a few value adds planned for that. But we know that there's a lot of value in that, because we have a student who did a project just over the road, almost identical, and she's just sold hers for $1.47 million. So we're looking at, you know, so you know, that sort of confirms that we've got a great little buy there. I'm sorry if these figures seem so horrible. Unfortunately, we do live in Sydney. But one of the things that we do is we actually team up, and I'll talk about that as we go along.
Bernadette, where you referred to a student did that, but this is a student of the School of Renovating that you sort of taught some of the principles.
One of the people that we work with.
Right.
Sorry?
Yes.
Is that
so
right?
Someone who's been through one of your courses has gone out and achieved that project, yes. Okay.
Yeah. So, yeah. Obviously the next step is to renovate. And so when you're renovating, you're thinking about increasing the cash flow as well as increasing the equity. So you want to get a double whammy. And you also want to attract a better tenant. Okay, someone that's going to look after the place and also is going to pay more for it. So this is another student, someone that's come through our training. So she has done, last year did 2 properties in Bathurst. So she wanted to go for the long-term rental. So she bought, this is one of them, she paid $265 for it. And she spent around about $25,000 on the renovation. And now she's got it rented on the long-term rental market for $350 a week. So she's done this one, she's done another one. But I've actually got a conversation booked in for her for this week because I think that she can be doing a lot better than that. So this is the inside. One thing she did do is she styled it to rent it. She had the furniture there all set to go. That helps to get a good price. Really simple, basic type of styling, but it just really improves the appeal of the property to the prospective tenants. Okay, so what we are doing is we are doing a positive cash flow strategy. And when you are positively geared, you need to engage some tax minimisation methods. The first one is the entity in which you buy the property. So I'm not going to talk about something that's outside my area other than to know that you need a good property accountant to help you with that. The entity depends on the strategy. So we buy properties that we're going to flip in a different legal structure to the ones that we're going to hold. That's to minimise the tax, but also to protect your existing assets. Okay, so whether you like it or not, investing is a business and you want to make sure that you're being as responsible as possible. So we actually I bring my property accountant into our trainings to give our students that information, you know, directly from the horse's mouth. The other things that you want to think about are depreciation. Okay, so that's something that costs you nothing and can really make a difference to your ongoing cash flow. So when you are renovating a property, if it's going to be available for rent, you want to make sure that if you can claim a scrapping schedule that you can do, which is basically writing off the things that you pull out of it. And the second thing is there were changes in the depreciation laws last year. That meant that if you bought a second-hand property, you could not claim the depreciation on the plant and equipment because you hadn't bought it. However, if you are actually installing the plant and equipment yourself, you can. So that's another advantage for renovators. They can depreciate the plant and equipment. Okay, so I've told you about that. So this is the next thing. So a couple of positive cash flow strategies that I think that everyone should be thinking about. And the first one is Airbnb. Now, the great thing about Airbnb is that you can have money flowing in 24 hours. It's an incredible platform. There are a lot of people doing it. There is a big difference between an everyday host and a savvy host. And for lots of reasons. One of the main things about Airbnb is I've actually made a point of outsourcing everything, and which you can do by engaging a company to do that for you, but you give away a lot of your profit by doing that. So basically what we do is we set up a platform to allow us to leverage our time. So we have a virtual assistant who's someone who's not who operates online, who manages all the bookings and all the communication with the guests, and lets the cleaner know when she's got to go and clean, and manages all the expenses, so that all that you're having to do is maybe meet and greet and troubleshoot if there's a problem. Otherwise, if you've got a few properties on Airbnb, it can really wear you down. So currently I've got 4 properties. And thankfully, the only input I have is, you know, when there's a problem, which thankfully is not too often. So I really encourage our people to use Airbnb because the cash flow is just incredible. So this property was another one of our community. She'd owned this property for 20 years and it was getting pretty ordinary returns. So first thing you do is decide what market you're going for. She wanted to go for the luxury market. So as a result, she did a bit of a makeover and styled it to a luxury market. So she's getting between $300 for weekdays a night and $450 for weekends. So you can see there she's down at $301 at the moment. But so that's really pushed the cash flow of that through the roof.
Have you got any idea, Bernadette, what sort of occupancy she's getting?
Very, very high, yeah. And to be honest with you, that's part of the skill of managing an Airbnb, is having your occupancy high, but not too high. So if you have more than, the next 4 weeks is completely booked out, then it's probably, your price is probably too low. So you really need to want to keep your bookings, your solid bookings, only about 2 weeks ahead. Okay, so we have a bit of a sort of an algorithm that we apply to just make sure that you're not pricing yourself too low. So it's a little bit of a juggling act. But, you know, I would say most of the people that we have with properties on Airbnb have them around about 90% occupied. And that 10% is often because they're only accepting 2 nights or 3 nights and there will be gaps in between guests.
The impression that I have, you correct me if I'm wrong, is that obviously you can increase your income by going down the Airbnb short stay type route, but you're going to have greater wear and tear on your property than if you had a standard residential permanent tenant. Is that correct, or is that a misconception?
I would really argue that. Yeah. I don't know. I've had pretty ordinary long-term tenants. And I think with anyone living in a property, after 2 or 3 years, the paintwork is starting to look a bit tired. So, yeah, I would argue that.
Okay.
So I'll show you a property in a minute that I've had on for quite some time. And, yeah. So this is a property that another of our community, she bought this in North Wollongong. She paid, I think the figures will come up in a minute. I think it was either $420, I think. So she's got it on for starting at $104 a night. That's a 2-bedder, fairly solidly booked. She did a really minor makeover. Like, this is all pretty much existing. That kitchen was those, you know, those vacuum form cupboard doors, and they'd started to sort of peel off like a shell. So she just ripped it all off and just painted the doors. And so it's really quite a basic renovation. So the thing with Airbnb is it doesn't have to be absolutely perfect. But as long as your listing is honest and you don't tell them it's freshly renovated when it's not, there is a place for every property on the market. So this is another property. This particular student has been working with us for about 3 years now. She bought this pair of new terraces in Newcastle when prices were quite respectable. She paid $317,000 for them each. Now, opposite where the Wickham station used to be. They renovated the first one. They were going to go long term and then decided to give Airbnb a go. So that returns around about, I think her rate's about $135 a night. As a result of that property, she no longer has to work. They renovated the other side to live in, but then when they were doing so well, they decided to move out and put that on Airbnb as well. And she told me the other day she's getting $5,000 per month for each of those properties. So she got written up in the local newspaper. And of course, so they're pretty serial renovators. So they're they've just got their next renovation on the market. And this one they're actually selling to sort of bankroll sort of a big project they want to do, but they've just finished this. And it's actually on the market now in Newcastle. So just a bit of eye candy for the people that love renos. Okay, create cash flow using multi-occupancy. Now this is an interesting story with this, because we do so much Airbnb. I actually was saying to my husband one day, I really think we should look at some affordable housing, because I feel quite uncomfortable about the fact that we sort of exploit the market because we do so well out of Airbnb. And his answer to me was he thought that that was not very commercial. But as it turns out, share accommodation is actually very commercial. And I met a guy by the name of Ian Ugarte. I'm sure that some of you would have had something to do with him. And because I was working on a project, which I'll show you in a minute, and the cash flow is just phenomenal. So just to show you, we have quite a few people that are doing share accommodation and have been. This is one student who, her thing is student accommodation. She bought this property in St. Lucia in Brisbane quite a few years ago. Now, I mentioned before that when you increase the bedroom count and you put the living space out of balance, it can be a negative. It can actually devalue the property. But because she was looking at student accommodation, she took a two-bedder, turned it into a three by carving up the lounge room. It left quite a small lounge room, so if you were a family wanting to live there, you might not be so thrilled. But for her, it's been a great exercise. So she did increase the value of the property a bit, but the great thing is the return. So it's returning 9%. And the trick with that type of property is, once again, renovating for low maintenance and low cost. Things like she has a coin washing machine in the laundry. She installs individual air conditioning to each of the rooms so that the tenant actually pays the power bill. Things like that to actually really keep her costs down so that she keeps the best of that income. Now, this is a property that that I was on this inquiry about how I could really get a great return from it. Firstly, it's in the west of Sydney, which I've since found out, according to Terry, it's in the area that's the fastest growing capital growth area in Australia. It's within 30 minutes of Badgerys Creek. And I had intended to build 6 townhouses on it. But I've since found that I can take advantage of a law in New South Wales, where I can actually build we call them micro apartments, which is just a colloquialism because they're based on the new generation boarding house structure. And so where everyone around me is building the biggest they can get, 4-bedroom, 2-bathroom townhouses, I'm going to be building the smallest I can get, which will be 1-bedroom, modern, well-appointed studios. So I should be able to get about 25 on this property. And as a result, that will increase my cash flow by at least $100,000. So it's a big project, and of course that's not what everyone can do, but in every state in Australia, and at every price point, there are opportunities for creating share homes, even in existing properties. Obviously, the legislation varies from state to state, so you need to make sure that you abide by that. But that is a fantastic way to jack up your cash flow and your equity. Okay, so I'm just about to the end, but one of the questions I get asked is, what if I don't have enough money to get started? Say you don't have your family home, don't have enough equity in it, or you don't have one, or whatever the reason is. And what I would say to you is the best thing to do is to team up. Okay, so this is some of our, little group of our community who have teamed up to do a joint project. They're actually doing a splitter around Ipswich to generate a lump sum so that they can go on to their next project and get I call it their money tree, started. But the other key thing is, if you're younger, you can maybe borrow some equity from your parents. This is a mother and daughter team. They're in Elwood. They bought this property. They paid $600,000. They bought it in Lila's name. That's the daughter, because she was eligible for the first homeowners stamp duty exemption. And so they're doing a structural reno, but the big value add in this property is that they've been able, it wasn't a strata title, so they've been able to convince the rest of the owners corporation to convert the complex to strata title. So that will make a serious impact on the value of the property. And yes, I don't know what they're doing about cash flow, but, and the other thing is that what we've been doing with our children is actually doing projects with each of them where we put in the project money, as in the deposit and the renovation and buying costs, in from equity from our line of credit, and they get the loan and we do the project together. We're actually written up in the Financial Review a couple of weeks ago. That's us with 3 of our 4 children. We finished the first project and we're just starting the second one with David, which I showed you. So this is the one we did with our oldest daughter. So this was to give her the kickstart so that she could get ahead and buy her first property, which she's now done. So she got a loan, I think, for about $750, and so we were able to draw on our line of credit for the rest. We did the project together, we sold it for 1.25 and we made $155,000 profit. Just going through some of those, there's the figures. So just to show you how we financed it. So you can see the purchase price, all the costs. We reduced the holding by putting it on short-term rental during the waiting period, because of course when you're doing apartments, you have some approvals to get. Then the selling costs, and we made a profit which we shared. And so Hannah took hers and she's gone and bought her first property of her own in East Malvern in Victoria. And there's just a few photos. Okay, so, I love this saying. It's a Chinese proverb. The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, but the second best time is now. So if this is something that you would like to think about, like to act on, I'd like to just make you a special offer, given that you are in Terry's community and have turned up to a webinar in the middle of the day, which I think is absolutely incredible. So obviously we have products, different products to suit different needs, starting from $999. But the best thing to do is to book in a strategy call, which we normally charge $199 for, but I'm happy to give you one of those for free, so that you can have a conversation with either one of my team or me to work out whether what we offer is something that might apply to you and get you the result you want. And if you do decide to go on to purchase one of our programs, we will be able to give you a 25% discount. So if you would like to claim that, all you need to do is email us on admin@theschoolofrenovating.com by Friday, and we will book in a time and get that sorted out. Either that, or you can go to our website and look up our phone number and call us, whatever you'd like to do. But I want to thank you for being such a great audience, and I want to really make sure that I get every one of your questions answered. So are we ready to go, Terry?
Yes, we are. If I could take you back to the Belmont property.
Yes.
Where Tim was just interested in, I think from memory, there was quite a significant increase in value from about 305 to 430,000, and
yes.
I think you mentioned basically a cosmetic renovation. So Tim was asking, and I was also curious as to how that was achieved.
To be honest with you, it was basically cosmetic renovation, but they did actually pull out a wall because it was a 2-bedder. And it had this tiny little 3rd bedroom under the stairs that was not big enough to be a bedroom, to the laundry. So they pulled out a wall to make it a proper bedroom, because it wasn't a 3-bedder. So it turned it into a 3-bedder. But the rest of the renovation was replacing the kitchen, tidying up the bathroom, painting, floor coverings, replacing the balustrade, fixing up outside, and yes, that was it. Generally, to be honest with you, I haven't got the exact costs, but we definitely don't spend any more than 10%. In actual fact, on an investment property, I would be spending less than 10% of the value of the property. So you're talking about around about 30,000 renovation.
So that's a rule of thumb that you generally apply to your projects, that you don't spend more than 10% of the purchase price
on a predominantly cosmetic renovation. And like if it was, and that we're talking about a house there, on an apartment it's less. And yeah, and if it's an investment property it's less again. So because there's a lot, when you are flipping, you need to actually present the property in peak condition, okay? So you spend more to actually deliver that, so that, and you know, also included is styling, you know. But when you're not going to be selling it, obviously it needs to be good, but it's a different, you know, you're looking at a different sort of scenario. Like if I was flipping, I would make sure all the door handles were changed, all the light switches and power points were changed, everything was pretty well new, whereas I wouldn't do that in an investment property unless it needed it.
Okay. If we go back to the Bondi flat that you used as a case study, Ben was asking a few questions about that, including, you know, how many bedrooms are on that property and basically how that that profit was achieved.
So that, to be honest with you, I was a bit shocked with that profit. I was expecting them to get about 1.35, but Bondi is just still really hot at the moment. So just to be clear, I would have expected a 10% profit on that property, and they got significantly more. That what they did is they opened up the kitchen living, so they put a beam in to open up the kitchen living, so it was an open plan. So Bondi is full of upwardly mobile couples and professionals, so they want their living areas to be state of the art. They redid the bathroom, and basically the rest of it was cosmetic. They didn't really add function to it. Where the one that we're planning with David, we will be converting a laundry to an ensuite, so that it's going to be a 2-bed, 2-bath, and because we have the potential to do that, and also to be putting a beam in and opening up the kitchen, you know, the standard thing.
Okay. Just before I ask the next question, on behalf of participants, just to remind you that if you're out there listening in and watching, please use the chat box to type in your questions and I'll put them to Bernadette. Ben was also asking, and it's a question that I had written down to ask you as well, do you need to be in the same state or the same city as you're renovating, or can you do it remotely? So, well, we've got quite a lot of our community are renovating in Queensland at the moment because because there's some great opportunities there. And I have to say it does add an element of complexity to it. But the reality is, like most of our renovations will take, maybe 3-4 weeks. So, you do have to have a presence there. I don't think deferring, I've seen this where investors have deferred to a builder and it's gone pear-shaped and their costs have skyrocketed. So you do need to keep a handle of it. So I would suggest if you've bought an investment property, that's interstate, that I would I'd do all the preparation up front, so that when you went there, it was ready to go. And I would take a couple of weeks of holidays to get the bulk of it done. The other thing is we actually do have renovators who will, certainly in Victoria and in Queensland, who will renovate for you. So if that's what you need, they do renovations for investors. So we can put you in touch with those. Yeah. One of the things that struck me, Bernadette, watching was the importance of how important it is to get absolutely everything right. You had a case study there where you put the various costs, what you bought, the buying cost, the holding cost, etc., and the profit. profit margin, you could see how that profit margin could be very quickly eroded into a loss if you got something wrong or you just didn't know enough about what you're doing. It seems to me that you really do need to know a lot before you attempt this.
I think you need to know what to pay attention to. Like, I guess my feeling is, like, I make mistakes every project, but they're not like, there are some things that you just can't make a mistake on. The first one is that you absolutely need to get the right property and get it at the right price. Okay, so that's the first one that you've got to get right, because if you pay too much, it's just almost impossible to catch up. And then the next one is to do the right sorts of renovations. Some people, and I've been guilty of this in my early days, was just get way too hung up on things that are not going to give you a return. So actually knowing what you need to do to increase the value of that property and what you need to leave alone is one of the other things that is really important. The next thing is to be able to manage your quotes and your tradesmen in a timely manner, and so that they get it done sort of reasonably quickly, and that you don't end up with blowouts. See, one of the issues that a lot of people have is they'll put a tradesman on an hourly rate. And like, it's not that I don't do that, but I have a process. If I put someone on an hourly rate, I get an estimate from them, how long they think it's going to take, and roughly what it's going to cost. Like, there might be a day rate, and then I make sure I know what is a day. Is it 8 hours? Is it 6 hours? And then I'll monitor. And at the end of the first day, if they're not shaping up, I'll think, okay, so this is not going to work. I need to go to plan B. But because it's not always practical to get fixed price quotes for everything. But don't just give them an open checkbook. And I've seen that happen time and time again, and it's just a recipe for disaster.
Tim has another question, and I've heard you refer to this in some of your seminar presentations that I've attended, whether you have any tips on how you can source materials at discounted prices.
Yes. Yes. Like, obviously we have arrangements with a whole lot of different suppliers and get fantastic rates. However, one of the places where I get a lot of my suppliers from is, if I'm not able to find what I want, is to go onto eBay. Now, the thing with eBay is, like, I don't often buy off eBay, but any business with any nous has a presence on there. So you can usually, particularly with bathroom ware and, toilets, tapware, all that sort of stuff, it all comes out of China, even the stuff that we pay lots for. So the trick is, a bit like shopping for handbags in Hong Kong. You want to find you want the rip-offs, but you want the good quality ones. You don't want the ones that the handle's going to fall off, within a day. And so, door hardware is another thing that's really good. Like, I will buy that on eBay. I will order one set to see what the quality's like, to make sure the quality's up to scratch. And if it's good, then I'll order the whole lot. Okay.
One of the things that popped up in my mind, you were talking about somebody who, part of a strategy, it was a shared house strategy, was individual air conditioning. I was just wondering, how do you monitor that? How do you set that up so you can monitor and charge individually for something like air conditioning?
So you need to set it up on it's a lease, basically. So you'll have a head lease and you'll have subleases under it.
Okay.
Is that what you're talking about?
I'm just wondering, as I understood it, that particular student had put in individual air conditioning in the room, and each occupant was paying their own sort of electricity costs. I'm just wondering how that was.
So that basically was billed. So because they're set up with an individual meter, the electricity is actually billed to the person who rents that room.
Right. So individual meters is the answer to that.
Yeah.
Okay. Another point that came up, you mentioned the importance of storage, and I was just wondering what are some of the tricks of achieving that, particularly when you're sort of buying perhaps a studio apartment, converting it to a one-bedder, it's still very, very tight sort of floor plan. How do you achieve, what are some of the ways of achieving storage that's
Okay, so I guess one of the secret weapons with storage is flat pack. And so it's a bit hard. We did a job a couple of years ago that was absolutely minute, and I can't really explain it. I'd have to show you. But basically, the kitchen was 1.6 metres square. So we brought the cabinetry out into the sort of the main studio area, but made it look like it was cupboards, but in actual fact, it was the fridge. But yeah, and so basically we do fun things with flat pack a lot of the time. You know, like in a studio, wrapping the cabinetry around the bed is a great way to get sort of a lot of storage in. And, you know, yes, basically we stick flat pack wherever we can. In that last project the project that I showed you, the charity one, there was a little nib wall. So rather than having a nib wall sticking out in the room, we couldn't take it down because it was load bearing. I actually stuck some cabinetry in there and called it a studio. So put a bench top as a desk. So just between the nib and the wall, and then some cabinetry over the top. So it created a little study. So, you know, like you've got to think about what life's going to be like in that apartment when someone's living there. I'm thinking, well, someone walks in, they'll have a bag and a computer. The only place they can really drop it down is on the dining room table. So if we created this little office area over off into and utilised this little sort of nib wall that would have been a waste of space otherwise, and so it, you know, it creates a better function for it.
Okay. Just referring back to the earlier question about where you source renovation materials at good prices, like the comment that came in, so saying that he spent way too much at Bunnings over the years is, I guess you have to be there's those certain sources that are better than others, or? To
be honest with you, one of the things that Bunnings do, which is, so obviously I'm hoping he's got a power card because that at least gives you gets some discount, and anyone can get one of those. One of the things that Bunnings do is that if you find something that's priced cheaper somewhere else, they won't just match it, they'll better it by 10%. Now, I actually haven't got the energy to do this, but I know lots of people who will find it somewhere and then will go to Bunnings and say, here it is at this price, and they'll give it to them 10% cheaper. Some things, you know, it's hard to know. I don't know. Sometimes I don't think Bunnings are too badly priced and other times they're not. But a lot of places, if you've got an ABN, like Beacon Lighting, you join their trade club, you get 25% off their range. Temple & Webster, for styling things, you join their trade club. Who else have we got that we can just... I'll have to think about that. But yeah, there's lots of places. The other place that I absolutely love is Seconds World. Don't go online. If you can, go in there. I go in there with my plan about what I want. I try and buy run-out models because they're in top condition. They're brand new. They're just last year's model, which, you know, who cares? And generally, they will be about half price.
Do you negotiate on price? I mean, to a certain extent.
Oh, yeah, I do. Like, yeah. Yes.
Okay, good philosophy. You mentioned briefly some of the things you can do as splitters. Could you perhaps elaborate a little bit on that, what you meant by that, and where those opportunities arise?
Okay, so I think there's something like 14,000 splitters in Queensland. Apparently, at some point in time, the Queensland government decided to do a 2-for-1 offer. And so there's lots of splitters around. Now, I'm actually just I've got my buyer's agent looking for one for me at the moment, but they provide an interesting opportunity in that there's a few things you can do. One of our students actually sourced a no money down deal. She basically letterbox dropped, you know, something like 100 people who own splitters to ask if they were interested in selling, found a couple that were interested in selling, basically managed the process of the sale. There was a house over the boundary that needed to be demolished, got the approval to demolish it, and basically sold both the blocks and made 65,000 lump sum out of that. Okay, so there's a whole lot of different ways you can do this. We've got another couple who bought a house and on a splitter block, so double block, and originally they were going to move the house across and renovate it and then sell the block of land and then sell the renovated house, but the house was just too shot. It was an old Queenslander, but it was just chewed up with white ants. So they've ended up just selling off both the blocks. But if you can get something that's got a decent, and I've got another group that are doing this right now, has got a decent house on it that you can, if it's across the boundary, move it across, renovate it and hold it and just sell off the block and pay down some of your debt. It's a good way to get a high cash flow or a high equity investment property.
Questions come in, and I think some people out there just actually don't understand what is meant by a splitter.
Okay, a splitter is a double block that's on two titles. So as opposed to subdividing, if you've got a double size block that you can get approval to subdivide, which is quite a tedious and expensive process, a splitter is already two blocks. Often the property is over the boundary, so you've got to do something with that. But it's just to split the blocks, it's just a matter of paying to have the title split, which costs a couple of $100. The other great thing that I love about Queensland is if you have those great supermarkets for second-hand houses. So, you know, if you're a mad keen renovator, you can move the property across, renovate it, go and buy another house, bring it in, put that on the block, renovate it. You've got two investment properties out of the one purchase.
And when you mentioned earlier there's 14,000 splitters in Queensland, that means that there's 14,000 of these situations where there's the double blocks.
Yes.
Okay. So do they have a particular zoning attached to them so that people know what to look for?
No, I don't think so. There are actually a few around here, like someone the other day bought one in Mossvale. But there are a few around here, but Queensland by far has the bulk of them. And they're across all different zonings. Yeah, you need to really suss that out.
Yeah. One of the points you raised in your presentation was that you try wherever you can to buy off market. How do you actually achieve that? Do you need to establish relationships with certain selling agents? How do you get these off market properties?
Yeah, so that's really, so in my local area, I live in the Surrey Hills Redfern area. I have a really good relationship with my agent. So he just monitors the market all the time for me. So if he will go and see, like he'll be going on quoting on the sale of a property, you know, so he won't even have the agency agreement, and might come back and say to me, I think this one might be good for you. And so get me in before he's even got the agreement. So they may have done nothing, and so, you know, obviously you have that opportunity to get it off market. But if I'm working outside my area, I will work with a buyer's agent. Now, not all buyer's agents are created equal, I have to tell you. You know, when we have clients come to us, I hear the most horrendous stories about, you know, the things that their buyer's agents have bought for them. So that's why I'm really careful about who I recommend to our community, so I really only recommend people that I've used myself and I know they're going to be able to deliver. And so the buyer's agent that I use, the one I use in Sydney, she will go and sit in an agent's office for a day if that's what it takes to get the deal over the line. So the bit that I pay her to do that pales into insignificance.
Yeah. And in terms of the vendor in that case, why would they sell off market? I assume that there are benefits for them in a fast sale, and that they don't have to spend a lot of money on marketing costs.
So that depends. As long as you're getting the price for it, you know. See, the reason we try and buy off market is because we get them cheaper. So I would recommend, if you're planning to sell something and it's something that has appeal, it's not a development site or anything like that, then I would clean it up as best you can, make sure it's as clean as possible and tidy, and get rid of all the rubbish, have it looking spick and span, and style it. We know that styling adds 10% to your property, okay? And And if you don't do that, you're just leaving 10% on the table.
Okay, just referring back to the reference to a buyer's agent, somebody's typed in a question saying, who is that buyer's agent and how can we contact them?
If you want to send me an email, I'll share the details of my buyer's agent with you.
Okay. Well, Bernadette, we're almost in a time's up situation. I just thought before I wrap things up, if you could perhaps just go through the special offer on the screen and just repeat the details there and how people can follow up if they want to make contact with the School of Renovating. Okay,
thanks very much, Terry. So basically, what I'm offering you is a free strategy call, which we normally charge $199 if you come through our website, because firstly, we want to know that if you come into one of our programs, you're going to be able to get the result that you want. And then secondly, to tailor the correct program to you. As I said, our programs start at $9.99, which is for our Airbnb Empire training, and they go up to $3,999, which is for our renovation boot camp, and we also have our renovation training, which is online as well. So we've got lots of options, and if you would like to do that, just to send in an email so that we can get a call set up for you, and yeah, we'll take it from there. And if you could just do that by Friday, I would appreciate that.
Okay. Thanks again, Bernadette. Many thanks to everyone who's participated today, who's tuned in, and particularly those who sent in your questions and your comments. We've managed to respond to most of them, but there will be more. And if you do have more inquiries, please follow up by contacting Bernadette at the School of Renovating. Thanks to you, Bernadette, for a wonderful presentation. There's just so much priceless information in your talk today and so much knowledge that investors can use to advance their investment strategies. For the participants today and those who couldn't make it today, we've recorded today's webinar, and we'll be sending people who registered and tuned in today a link so they can listen to it again at their leisure. And if anyone wishes to follow up and make contact with Bernadette and the School of Renovating, the contact details are there on the screen. So thanks again for participating. Thank you, Bernadette, for a wonderful presentation. This is Terry Ryder from Hotspotting, signing off. Bye for now.